Grüß, willkommen in einem anderen Aufregens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 18 of my Star Trek The Original Series Timeline Analysis series of videos. In this video I'll discuss the Earth-Romulan War which occurred between 2150 and 2159. While we do possess a lot more references in the script to this war than many other events I've covered so far and will in the future, it is nonetheless rather sparse. I've noticed a lot of other Star Trek fans have created an enormous amount of detail concerning this period, which I will leverage in this video as well. But first I'll look at the existing references we have or possess in the scripts and determine likely scenarios for the war before I drill down into the astounding amount of fan theory details. Our first mention of Romulans is in the episode Balance of Terror. This episode contains most of the script-based references of the war. In the episode Balance of Terror, it does state that the Earth-Romulan conflict occurred a century ago. As it's currently 2264, that is, in the episode that the reference is made, this could mean the war occurred in 2164, plus or minus 1 year. Perhaps 2164 was the date it ended. The problem with this date is the Federation was formed in 2161, which needs to occur after the war. This would also mean Sarek was born during the war, which I must admit may be possible, but my gut feel tells me is unlikely. We know Denver, that's the colony planet, was first colonized in 2164, which is unlikely to occur during a major war. Why would you still be sending out colonists during a major life and death struggle unless it was on its way when the war started? Finally, the SS Archon was destroyed at Beta 3 in 2164, exploring that part of space. If a major war started out, this spacecraft would have been recalled to assist in the defense of Earth space. It may not be a powerful warship, but it was an exploration craft, thus it did have some weapons. I suspect Spock was providing a general time period and not an exact year. The chance the war occurred exactly 100 years ago at this moment is remote. I'm always suspicious of whole numbers like 100, which normally implies there is a lot of rounding or wriggle room. As long as the war occurred more than 100 years ago, Spock's comment would be correct, which is what I feel is the case here. The Okuda timeline states the Romulan War takes place in the 2150s, which means any time from 2150 to 2159. Other timeline theories pin the start date down to 2156 and the end date to 2160, which I feel could be correct or the correct time frame for most of the significant fighting. However, it's possible some skirmishing occurred between 2150 and 2155. As a result, my gut feeling is the war raged between 2150 and 2159, which aligns with the Okuda timeline statement perfectly. According to Spock, the combatants never physically saw each other and didn't know what each other looked like. This would mean no ship was boarded or captured and no inhabitants were ever captured on any planet or spacecraft. If a ship-to-ship conflict resulted in a total destruction of the ship and any colony world captured was first evacuated and destroyed, and both sides believed the other was going to kill them if captured, then this could be possible. This is a valuable clue which can assist us in determining how the war was fought and what could have occurred during the war. We also know from the TV series scripts the Romulans, when they sense weakness, take advantage of it. This is another clue to how the war could have begun. We also know from this episode the Romulan commander had seen 100 campaigns. Perhaps many were civil wars and revolts. But this means the Romulans are a highly militarized race and extremely experienced at war. This would have also applied in the 2150s war against Earth. In another episode, The Deadly Years, we learn the Romulans do not take captives. Perhaps this is one reason why the two sides never saw each other in person. The Romulans would simply destroy any ship instead of capturing it, and the Romulans would expect the same, so would keep on fighting to the end, probably destroying their own craft in order to take more Earthmen with them. In yet another episode, in this case the Enterprise incident, we discover the Romulan standard operating procedure is to destroy the enemy rather than asking for surrender. This confirms the earlier theory of not taking any hostages or captives. A bit of a side note, also in the episode The Enterprise Incident, we learn the Romulans have female commanders. While the Romulans are a highly militarist and aggressive race, they're clearly an equal opportunity race as well. In the episode Balance of Terror, we discover the Romulan ships look like a bird of prey. We also discover the Romulans have some old-style nuclear warheads in case they need to self-destruct. Perhaps the old-style nuclear warheads were the primary weapons used in the Earth-Romulan War. We also confirm the Romulans use impulse power and impulse drive. I would suggest a speed of no more than 200 times light speed, if not less, was capable by Romulan warships. Warp in this period would probably have a speed of about 400 times the speed of light, so Earth had an advantage in terms of speed. While we do have a lot of information here, it's not sufficient to create a detailed timeline of what occurred by itself. We need to look at events before and after and use some assumptions in order to arrive at what may have occurred. I will start with a general overview of the events that are most likely to have occurred, at least in my opinion, based on the study of the scripts that I've made so far. I have assumed that the territories of the United Earth and Romulans meet about 2150, and both home planets are 400 light years apart from each other. Both races would have been aware of each other before, and there may have even been some trade going on, but as no one was seen or has seen each other, this must be through an intermediary race. There must be another minor race in between Earth and the Romulans. It could be a single planet or a number of planets. The latter is more likely. The Romulans are in contact with one planet and United Earth the other, and if it possessed space flight, which it would if it has multiple planets, some trade would occur between the two. I feel the cause of any war would be related to this minor nation. I have to admit there are many scenarios that you could consider, but something must have caused the Romulans to go to war with this minor nation, with Earth coming in to assist, which escalated the war. As we know, any signs of weakness will be immediately taken advantage of. I suspect the Romulans sense weakness in this middle race and invaded it in 2151 or 2152. Earth then provided assistance, halting the Romulans, after which the Romulans sent a major force, which defeated the combined United Earth alien race forces, possibly in 2154 or 2155. This intermediary race could have been the mysterious allies mentioned in one of the quotes by Spock. The next stage of the war, which probably began in 2156, was the advance of the Romulans into United Earth territory. The United Earth fought a war of attrition, evacuating any minor colonies at risk and ensuring all food on those colonies was destroyed. This was a scorched Earth policy, or perhaps a scorched alien planet policy. It's possible the colony planets possessed some form of fixed defences, which would have inflicted casualties on the Romulans, even if the defenders were doomed. At some point, any further advance by the Romulans would threaten an United Earth colony which could not be evacuated. So the major battle of the war was fought then, perhaps in 2157. This resulted in a United Earth victory. Now we have a slow advance of United forces recapturing United Earth territories, which have taken us into 2158, and then advancing almost 100 light years into Romulan space before peace occurred. This takes us to the end of 2159, with peace signed in 2160. There's a lot of guesswork here, but I suspect something along these lines would have occurred to fit in with all the facts and information we have from the scripts at the present moment. Let's look at some of the military points I feel certain is correct. United Earth ships had a superior drive, which was warp drive, so their ships were faster. Romulan ships were otherwise superior, both in fighting capacity and experience. The other military points I want to cover are less certain. Shields and phasers were likely weaker, and the main ship killers were photon torpedoes or whatever type of missile was used in the war, possibly using atomic warheads. This means when a ship was hit, it was pretty much entirely obliterated, ensuring there were no bodies to inspect. Possibly the photon torpedoes or atomic missiles could be destroyed by phasers, which probably was their main function, that is the phasers. This is not required, but at least allows for opposing ships to slug it out before one was totally vaporized. I'll assume this is the case in my discussion of tactics. The phaser, in turn, may not be strong enough to penetrate the shields easily, so is not that useful in direct ship-to-ship combat, only as an anti-missile system when enemy missiles came in at it. The script does talk about old-type atomic warheads, so the missiles may have had an atomic warhead instead of an antimatter warhead. Thus, they were larger and heavier, but still able to easily destroy a starship if they hit it. The missiles may not have been photon torpedoes, which I assume are propelled by photonic drive. This is why they are so bright when under power, that is in most series, and which propels them to incredible speeds, which makes them impossible or difficult to destroy in flight. If the missiles used a slower drive, then this makes them vulnerable to phaser fire. The atomic warheads are still strong enough to destroy a ship, and likely shields have minimal effect in this case, or the shields basically have no ability to defend against an atomic warhead, but they can defend against phasers or anything else weaker. Let's now look at the territory the war was fought over. The white arrow here indicates the point the two nations touched. There is a minor nation here with a home planet and probably two small colony planets in different systems, one on the human side and one on the Romulan side. This allows both major nations to have relations with the minor nation while ensuring they never met each other. That is, the Romulans and Terrans, or Earth people, never physically met each other. While I have to admit the events in the Star Trek series Enterprise only bears a superficial resemblance to the original series timeline, as long as it does not conflict, using ideas from that series could be used to explain the mysterious minor nation. A possible race could be the Aenar, who left Andoria many years prior, like the Romulans, and founded their own civilization far away from their former home planet. There are massive issues with this theory, but I personally like it. One advantage with this theory is their planet may be ice worlds, which are difficult to occupy. Thus, this explains why the Romulans abandoned the planets and only fought in space in the system when they were defending against Earth people. They had to have done this, otherwise the Earth people would have found their bodies. That way, no Romulan bodies would be found by the United Earth forces when they retook these planets, which they almost certainly did. The arrow here shows the Vulcan planet with the transparent orange or brown circle representing its loose trading alliance or association. Most of the initial Federation alien members would probably have come from here. While not initially involved in any war, they would have provided economic assistance, perhaps even something like Lend-Lease. It should be noted the economic power in this area is considerably significant. It is a very powerful area. The large yellow dot here represents the three primary planets of United Earth, all within 4 to 5 light years of each other. Basically, Earth, Mars, and Alpha Centauri. The dark blue circle represents the area where the main colony planets reside. These would have all consisted of colonies which contained significant populations which could not easily be evacuated, perhaps even up to 1 million people each. The light blue circle represents the area where smaller colonies and bases were established. These were all very small, probably only a couple of hundred people, and could easily be evacuated. The same situation applies on the Romulan side. The central yellow dot represents 95% of the economic power and population of the Romulan Star Empire. This is the three main planets that we see in the episode which talks about the war. The dark red dot represents just less than 5% of their economic power, and the red represents, that's the lighter red, represents sparsely populated colony planets. It's possible that subject planets could reside here as well, but as no mention of these are made, let's assume they exist but happen to not be in the area fighting occurred. The same could apply on the United Earth side. Perhaps some allied planets were in the light blue circle, they just weren't involved in the fighting. As this adds far too much complexity, I'll assume the fighting bypasses any of these alien planets not directly involved in the war. If this map is correct, then either side would need to cross about 150 light-years of logistically barren space. There is no bases, food or other resources in this area, so as a fleet moves away from its closest base, supply would become more difficult. I would suggest each opposing side would build bases in this area with minimal personnel but armed with significant defensive weapons. These could be overcome but would require time and ammunition, especially missiles. Any fleet would need food and ammunition, specifically missiles, as it advanced over this 150 light-year barren space. This represents an issue for any invader. The only major base between the home worlds, that's the Vulcan and Earth, would be this unknown minor nation. It would at least represent a source of food, even if it did not produce ammunition such as missiles. Of course, if you occupy this minor nation against their will, you need occupation troops, which would even further strain any logistics. So it's unlikely this would help the Vulcans particularly much, the Romulans particularly much. As the old saying goes, amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics. Let's look at it into a detailed scenario. A possible scenario could be both United Earth and Romulans make contact with the minor nation and establish trading relationships. The Romulans do so to scout a possible target for conquest, the United Earth for economic or other security reasons. The Romulans then make unacceptable demands on the minor nation, which are rejected, and the Romulans move a small military force into the minor nation's territory, taking the colony planet by the end of 2151. That is the planet they were trading with. They calculate this is sufficient to conquer this entire minor nation and prepare to move onto the home planet. There is no need to hurry, however. The minor nation's plea for military assistance to the United Earth, resulting in a minor Earth force being provided to help hold the whole planet that happened to be close by, as well as any major supplies of defensive weapons that were close enough, such as missiles, were then provided. When the Romulans finally attack the home world of this minor nation, they meet unexpectedly powerful forces and are defeated. This is unexpected and takes the Romulans by surprise. The Romulans now know there must be a powerful force assisting the minor nation and start to fully mobilise. We have two possible scenarios now. Scenario 1, United Earth may be also preparing for war, but they do not expect a major escalation to total war. It's been over 100 years since they last experienced a major war and hope this war will not escalate. Basically, they've forgotten the lessons learned during the major global wars on Earth, lessons which they will have to relearn. This is common in human history. Nonetheless, they are moving to a war footing. Just in this case, it's much slower than the Romulans. Now, the second scenario, which I feel is the more likely, the Romulans are always prepared for total war, and the whole Earth is also preparing and rapidly mobilising because they did not forget the lessons of the World War over 100 years ago. They are nonetheless on the back foot initially because they're not on a constant total war footing, which the Romulans are. This second scenario, I feel, is the better one, but scenario 1 could also apply. Regardless, it results in the same outcome. This period, likely from 2153 to 2155, is one of gradually increased escalation as reinforcements are pumped into the war zone. The Romulans are sending more reinforcements than United Earth, simply because they're closer and have more stuff ready, and finally inflict a crushing defeat by 2155, with the loss of the minor nation's home planet and remaining colony planet of that alien race. The Romulans now drive deep into United Earth territory, taking heavily fortified bases left behind by United Earth and suffering losses in their merchant fleet while supplying the main Romulan fleet. The losses are basically United Earth pirates, which are preying, or equivalent of submarines preying on the merchant ships. The United Earth leaves no foods or useful resources behind, and any remaining colonies are totally destroyed. The Romulans are suffering losses and begin to have logistic issues. The United Earth fleet, while avoiding combat, slowly grows in strength as it retreats back to its core planets. As the Romulans get close to the United Earth core planets, the United Earth fleet finally has to make a stand. If United Earth is defeated, then the Earth will be lost. If it wins, they will be able to survive. It's a desperate fight with superior but slower Romulan spacecraft taking a heavy toll of the weaker but faster United Earth spacecraft. But the United Earth prevails, and the Romulans are defeated and retreat. It's quite possible the Romulans were running out of missiles, and thus the Earth or United Earth managed to get a final victory because of this. Any of these kind of scenarios are quite viable. The war has now shifted. United Earth advances quickly as the Romulans only have minimal defensive assets in United Earth territories. But when they get to the minor nation world, the advance turns into vicious fighting. Assisted by resistant forces on the minor nation planets, and with more significant assistance from the Vulcan Trade Association, the United Earth prevails and clears the systems of Romulan spacecraft. I have an issue now. If the Romulans have ground forces, then they would be seen. So I have to assume the Romulans decide to evacuate these hostile planets and conduct the fight in space around the planets. This is a real stretch, but we need to keep the opposing sides from seeing each other. Perhaps the local aliens rise up and force the remaining Romulan ground forces to retreat. However, they would need to take any bodies back with them, or perhaps the main Romulan base is nuked and no bodies are left. After the Romulans withdraw from the minor nation and withdraw into Romulan space, it's now United Earth's turn to suffer losses as Romulan bases are neutralized slowly. The United Earth logistics become more difficult, but at least the alien planets they have liberated would be providing some assistance, or a lot more assistance than they have provided the Romulans, particularly for food. United Earth has some advantages over the Romulans, but when Romulans sue for peace, the United Earth is happy to comply as they're suffering both logistic issues and war weariness. This likely represents the final borders between the two territories at the end of the war, which is 2159 or 2160. The yellow dotted line represents the borders at the beginning of the war. The minor nation probably joins the Federation as one of the early members. I have no idea who this would be, and I suspect they spend most of the following years quietly rebuilding their shattered planets or planet. Incidentally, this map is based on a map in one of the episodes of Star Trek. While this video is mainly interested in the big historical picture, let's do some discussion about tactics, because it's required in order to explain some of the events in my theory. The first is defensive facilities. To allow for the Romulans to suffer attrition, some low-cost and easily defensive measures are required at the United Earth colony planets. A good solution would be to move a few asteroids into orbit around a planet, place a base deep in the asteroid, and place missile launchers all around the base. This would allow the Federation to create fortifications, which would be reasonably effective. The Romulans would need to saturate the asteroid with missiles to destroy it, expending a large amount of missiles while suffering casualties from the asteroid's missiles in turn. I could see the Romulans slowly moving closer to the asteroid until one side fires all their missiles. Firing first would provide no advantage and may even be a disadvantage. It's all about distance. This bombardment would result in the destruction of the asteroid, but would inflict casualties on the Romulan spacecraft. Now, the Romulans could simply bypass this base, but these bases would be very useful for United Earth pirate vessels or merchant raiders, so they can't allow these bases to exist. A very small and light ship packed with missiles, and depending on speed and manoeuvrability to avoid enemy missiles, may be effective and a low-cost defensive asset in addition to the asteroids. These type of spacecraft may even be based on the larger defensive asteroids. Fleet actions would consist of the two fleets approaching each other, manoeuvring around to provide some tactical advantage when they launch their missiles. The closer they would get, the less time the enemy would have to destroy the missiles with their phasers. Waiting for the right time to launch missiles would be a critical factor, as well as where those missiles are going to be concentrated on. The idea would be to get as many missiles as possible on a single target at the same time to overwhelm their phaser defences. If one missile gets through, it would be over. Each fleet would throw several salvos of missiles at each other as they approached. It would be a rather chaotic and brutal battlefield to be involved in, and it would result in terrible casualties. The Romulans would have been more experienced and their ships stronger, but the United Earth ships would be faster and capable of flank attacks. It would be like the Roman legions against the Parthians in some ways, or perhaps Rome versus Carthage. From this point on, I'm going to use the work of others to look at what kind of spacecraft could have been used in the war. Apart from some very minimal script references, this looks like it's all total speculation. But as it does not conflict with the original series script, I might as well use it as a placeholder canon. I have to admit, the work done by these folks, the folks which created these image and data, is very impressive, and I wish to commend their efforts. All credit goes to him or her or them. If you want to use this ship, please ask him. I'll leave the link at the end of the video for anyone interested in looking at the spacecraft in more detail. I'm going to use this excellent Starfleet 2135-2161 guide, which may or may not be correct, but it's nice and detailed and fits the minimal facts I possess, so what the heck, I'm going to use it. The Ganges-class frigate would have been obsolete in 2156 and may have been in reserve when the war began, but they would have been quickly taken out of reserve and brought back into full operational service for this emergency. The Fearless-class frigates would have been the primary merchant raiders of the United Earth forces. While weak, they would have been very effective in picking off supply ships. When United Earth went to war in 2151 or maybe 2156, this was the most numerous warship. It was reasonably old, but probably took the brunt of the initial Romulan attacks. I expect all 70 of the class would have been in operation in 2156. This was the spacecraft which blunted the Romulan attack and pushed the Romulans back. I expected it would have suffered pretty horrible casualties. As an FYI, while not part of the original generation or series, a model of the Horizon, a Daedalus-class starship, is on Sisko's desk in a Deep Space Nine episode. The Freedom class would have been affected in merchant raiding, but was probably mainly deployed with the main fleet to provide forward scouting. Supporting the Daedalus class was the less numerous Einstein class. This was a much more effective starship, and would have taken their place at the centre of any fleet position at the critical battle. The Sarajevo assault ship would have transported the ground troops if required to liberate the minor nation planets. As it turned out, I suspect it was never really needed. I expect the Intrepid-class ships were still being commissioned when the Romulans appeared in 2150, but all 8 ships were in service when they were required to take their place in the fleet during the critical battle. This represents a powerful spacecraft and also would have adopted the central position in any fleet. The NX class were much heavier and the first ship commissioned at the start of the war. I expect the building of these ships would have been fast-tracked, but almost certainly some would have not been ready for the climatic battle in 2157. Perhaps 3 were still being built, leaving us with 12 at the battle. I also suspect these vessels were a match for the Romulan spacecraft, and with experienced crew could take on an equal number of Romulan warbirds of prey spacecraft. While only a few of this class, Poseidon class, would have been available in 2157, this became the primary fleet scout vessel, taking their place in front of the fleet as they approached each other. The Cassandra class was the most powerful frigate in the United Earth fleet, But considering when these ships were available, they were likely not conducting any attacks against Romulan supply lines. Instead, they were probably used to protect the stretched United Earth supply lines. The Oberon class was used in the very late war period, supporting the main fleet on the flanks after the heavy losses of the older spacecraft in 2157. The Yorktown was also a very late war spacecraft and would have provided the United Earth with a powerful punch in any fleet action. I suspect it was never or had never engaged or was never involved in engaging the enemy in a fleet action, as the war ended before it could really arrive. The Minimat class destroyer was another late war vessel which only saw very limited action before the war ended. The Hunter class corvette was another late war light ship which once again only saw very limited action before the end of the war, most likely used in protecting the supply lines of the United Earth. The Winchester class was the most powerful destroyer ever built during the war. This spacecraft did not even leave United Earth space before the war ended. Let's now look at the Romulan fleet. The Romulans would have possessed a light spacecraft as well to provide scouting, patrolling and raiding capability. It was probably something similar to the Bird of Prey class, heavier but slower than the United Earth equivalent spacecraft. The primary warship of the Romulan fleet was this cruiser. Class name is unknown. It would have been superior to the Earth class Daedalus class, but equivalent to the United Earth NX class. The heaviest spacecraft was the Cabbage class. I assume the name Cabbage was given to it by the United Earth. I can't imagine the Romulans calling their spacecraft a Cabbage. But anyway, this was commissioned in time to enter the war against the United Earth. This was unmatched until the Earth Yorktown class was commissioned. I have no idea how accurate any of this is, but I do enjoy reading what other people think about concerning Star Trek spacecraft. However, I simply feel that apart from some basic ideas of strength and role, we'll never have a good idea of the technical aspects of any of these spacecraft. The writers were simply not interested in that topic. However, as long as everyone's guess does not impact the scripts, I see no harm in assuming this could be correct. And so we come to an end of episode 18 of my Star Trek, the original series timeline analysis video, in this case covering the Earth-Romulan War, which occurred sometime between 2150 and 2159. The episode scripts can be found using the URL shown. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.